Hi, everyone. My name is Katie Sunderlin. I'm the Senior Affordable Housing Coordinator for the City of Colorado Springs. So what I do is I oversee all of our affordable housing activity from new multifamily construction to affordable home ownership to down payment assistance to community land trusts, really just the whole spectrum of housing that we work on.
Great, thank you.
So, we good to click.
Okay,
We already went over that one.
okay,
And that one.
and now,
Katie, this is your slide.
all right.
Oh, great. Okay, I think Randy was alluding to this a little bit. One of the things that we really need to understand is how to define what affordable housing is. Because there's a lot of terms that surround the word affordable and like attainable and market rate, as I heard someone ask. So what we want to talk about here is what is affordable housing and what makes housing affordable. And so what makes housing affordable is if a household is not spending more than 30% of their gross income on their mortgage plus their taxes and their rent their rent plus their utilities. And so currently, if you can see in that bottom right hand of this slide, currently in Colorado Springs, 1/3 of our population is spending more than 30% of their gross household income on housing expenses, with 17% paying more than 50%. And so we consider people who are paying more than 30% cost burdened and more than 50% of their income severely cost burdened. And so what that does is it just leaves no space for households to be able to spend more money on like healthcare expenses, on food, on transportation. I mean, really like basic necessities, not to mention if you wanted to go to the movies or something like that. So when we talk about affordable housing, what we want to keep in mind is that there's 3 A's of affordable housing. There's capital A affordable housing, lowercase a of affordable housing, and attainable housing. So capitalized A affordable housing, as Randy says, is something that is subsidized. So that means that something that the government has put money into, and they're saying, if we give you our money, you need to guarantee us that this is going to stay below this 30% marker for residents for 20 or 30 years. Now, lowercase a affordable housing is housing that does not require more than 30% of a household's income to obtain, but it happens naturally in our housing stock. So we can say like an older apartment building, typically as our buildings age, the rent goes down. And that's what we call naturally occurring affordable housing. And so there are units in our community that are affordable just because they're older. And then attainable housing is housing that is affordable. So lowercase a to somebody who's making the median income in Colorado Springs. And so for a household of 4 in Colorado Springs, the median, so right smack dab in the middle, 50% of the population makes less than this and 50% makes more, is $105,000. So if you are typically that household of 4 is made up of 2 working adults and 2 children. Are there any questions on that? There's a lot of information on one slide.
Is there an attainable lowercase and capital? Or just
just a lowercase a for attainable. The only capital A affordable housing is when there is a government subsidy within there or some type of restriction on the rent that can be charged.
Maybe. I'm gonna go now.
No.
It's frozen. There we go.
And this is the one that I was talking about, that we're concerned with all the housing from the shelters on up through market rate home ownership. Next one. So we did the data. There we go. So these were the questions that we were asking. And then the next one is all the data. And that's where we're getting all the answers that we're finding.
Okay.
And then, Katie, back to you.
Yep. So one of the things that we're looking at in the conversations that I'm having with developers and people who are coming into our community saying, like, what type of housing do you need to provide? those answers are truly based on how our population is growing and what type of households are in our community. So in 2018 and 2019, the city produced a document called Home COS, and we did a ton of research on who lives in our community, who lives in Colorado Springs and in El Paso County. We're growing, and I'm sure everybody in the room knows that we're growing in population. We are a very attractive city for a lot of people, and so our population continues to rise. Which means that we need to provide housing for people to be able to come in and to fill the jobs that we're creating, and just to really keep our economy moving. The other thing that we found during this research process is that the type of household that we're seeing is changing from what we would consider our typical nuclear family, which would be two adults and children, is changing to adults living with other adults. So if you have a roommate, and we see that happening a lot lately, that trend is continuing later in life. Or if you have a grandparent that lives in your home, or if you are living in a home with your parents, there's a lot of intergenerational living that really just makes there's a need for us to create a different type of housing stock. And so we were taking a look at a lot of these trends and trying to figure out what do we want to prioritize and incentivize from a city level to come in and produce housing.
Well, I worked with it. There we go.
Okay, so what's our problem here? And I'm sure, I don't know if anybody in the room is looking for housing right now, if they're or recently has looked for a place to live or to buy a home. This graphic on the left here really kind of summarizes what our real problems are. If you look at the orange line is the incomes in Colorado Springs, the median income, and you can see that line stays relatively flat. Those two green lines represent our housing costs. The lighter green one is the median price for a single family home, and the darker green one is the median price or an average price for a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom apartment. So you can just see, all you need to really see is that our incomes are staying flat, but our housing prices are just skyrocketing. So it is very difficult to fill that gap without roommates or extra side hustles, all of the things. I mean, this is the problem, right? This is why we have to be working on affordable housing in our community. And some of the tools that we have to assist some of our lower income households with this gap, like a housing voucher. So you might be familiar with the phrase Section 8. What that is it's a voucher that a family and household can use in any apartment complex, and they will pay 30% of their income, and that voucher will pay the difference between what the 30% of their income is and the rest of the rent. So let's just say 30% of their income equaled out to be $1,000 a month in rent. If their unit was $1,500, that voucher would pay that $500 difference. This is a great program. However, it's a 2-year wait for this. It is very expensive for us to build new multifamily housing. It's on average about $350,000 per door. And most of the new apartments that we're seeing going in are between 50 and 150 units. So these are multi-million-dollar projects. It does not, the price to build an affordable housing project is no different than a market rate project. It's the same construction materials. There's just a lot of different financing that's involved. And then rental application fees have risen. I don't know if any of you have had to apply to multiple apartment complexes, but this becomes a pretty huge burden after a while for households. And then on our ownership side, one of the things that we're seeing is a trend of larger homes. This is just because our households are getting bigger and people just want more space. And now with COVID, there's been some shifting in trends that the in-home office is starting to come back into style. And so this is just creating larger homes, it just creates a larger entry purchase price. So we just got problems everywhere, if you guys didn't know.
Ready for the next slide?
Yep.
Your counterpart is left, so you're running solo for a little bit here.
Oh, I'm running solo. Okay, great.
Yeah, just for a little bit. She'll be back.
Okay. So what we're highlighting here is kind of what we've been highlighting is that homeownership is out of reach for most of our workers in our community. Many people are spending more money than they should be on housing. Our market wages are not keeping up with our housing costs, and half of our renters are cost burdened. I mean, this is really a scary place to be for an economy. But so this graphic on the right here is outlining these dark green bars are wages of some of our typical and large industry providers. So a lot of people reference firefighters and police officers and teachers in our affordable housing conversations. As you can see, firefighters are making about $87,000 per year, which really is it's not the area median income. And that black line at the top is what would be needed to buy a single family home. And also this number is honestly, it's outdated by just a few months, and that has shifted up to 176%. So just you need to make $176,000 per year to be able to afford the median home just with the interest rates right now. So that's two very sizable incomes together to be able to afford and not pay more than 30% of your income on housing to be able to afford a single family home. Now you can see this black line in the middle here that's talking about rent at $1,500 a month. So you can see that you would need to make at least almost $70,000 per year to afford the average rental unit in Colorado Springs. And you can see that our teachers are not making that. Our food services workers are not making that. Our warehouse workers, distribution warehouse, that's an Amazon worker. So these people are paying more than 30% of their income and likely more than 50% of their income just on their housing. And so that really does not leave any room for savings for healthcare, for any of those things. And I don't know if anyone's been to the doctor recently. It's not getting cheaper. But we can go to the next slide. Are there any questions?
Questions about this slide? Not at the moment, Katie.
Okay. Great. Okay, so what these maps are depicting is what poverty looks like in our community. So the map on the left is El Paso County, and the darker the purple, the higher the poverty rate. And then the map on the right is the city of Colorado Springs. So what you can see is poverty, at least in the city, really is distributed pretty evenly throughout. I mean, I think you probably will recognize some of the areas of our city that are either in or not in poverty. And it affects everyone. It truly affects families, seniors, individuals. It really has no boundary. And we have seen a 73% increase in our poverty rate in Colorado Springs since 2000, which is just leading us to need more affordable housing. And in this orange circle here on the right or left, if I don't know if it's mirrored or not, if that homeless count is really scary for us, and is actually probably an undercount. What this is counting is saying that there are teachers or families that are self-reporting that they are homeless and that their children are experiencing homelessness. And what we have found is that these counts are typically incredibly undercounted because families are really nervous about DHS coming and taking their children away from them if they are experiencing homelessness. But what this does is it causes housing instability for kids. And when there's not a stable environment for kids to come home to, their brains are never able to relax and are not able to retain knowledge and able to learn in a classroom setting. And so we have more and more kids falling behind in our educational system. So having stable housing is really, really advantageous for our children in our community.
Can you explain
Can I
how?
add a comment?
Yes.
I think it's very telling that there's a lot of black or dark or purple areas around our university.
of UCCS. That's what that area is there, as well as our military bases. There's a lot of poverty you're seeing on the Air Force Academy and in Fort Carson by your standards as well. And I think that's really telling.
How does poverty defined?
I'd have to go double check. There's some of the poverty line is different than the HUD line that I typically use. And honestly, that I think would have been a good Randi question because I think she uses the poverty line.
Okay, got it.
But it doesn't say poverty has a lot of definitions of what we're talking about here.
Yes. Okay, sorry, I need to keep moving my thing around. Okay, so what we're talking about here is what our single family homes look like and what it takes to get into home ownership. And there's something called Drive Till You Qualify, which is essentially if you're not making, the $176,000, what you're doing is you're buying in Pueblo, in Fountain, in Ellicott, in kind of the outskirts of Colorado Springs, and then driving in. This becomes a problem because then people are not factoring in the transportation costs for that. And so they might not be spending more than 30% of their income on their housing, but now they're spending, 15% on transportation, which is kind of a difficult issue. But in our communities, what we're seeing as our makeup of homes, we're seeing about 62% of our homes in Colorado Springs are single family. 2% are mobile homes, 17% are large apartments, and then 19% are what we call missing middle. And so if you remember that graphic that Randi talked about at the beginning, there's all of these like quadplexes and duplexes and triplexes that we really just aren't building anymore, which are really great entry points into home ownership. That's kind of what we're trying to be focusing on there. And then the graphics on the left and the right are talking about our percent change in our population between 2010 and 2020. And what we're really trying to figure out is how do we get more housing into some of our central areas so that we can absorb this population growth and keep people within our community as opposed to having them drive into the outskirts of Colorado Springs and into El Paso County if they are working within the city. We can go to the next slide.
Brandon.
Yes, question?
Randi mentioned how it's such a high percentage of new apartments. You have the word luxury somewhere in their advertising. Mm-hmm. Can you talk to speak to the development that you're seeing and how it's being responsive to the growth needs that we need for the types of housing, like where those disconnects are?
Yes. So, the other part is that, we do need some of that luxury housing, honestly, because we do have some very high paying jobs. And I heard her kind of talking about the latter. So right now, we have had an underbuild of apartments in Colorado Springs for many, many, many years. We have been an underbuilt multifamily market. And so we're now seeing that start to catch up. I think in the next few years, we'll start to see that become a saturation of multifamily. But right now, honestly, I do see the need for all types of multifamily in the market studies that I'm reading. Does that answer your question?
I think we're just curious on. So it sounds like there's need for that. For luxury housing. What was it? 40%? 35%. Like should 60% of development be going towards multifamily homes, or can you just discuss, is that a part of your conversations with developers when they're coming in, or, what the glaring needs you're seeing, or, when we see a high rise, apartment come up downtown, of course, there's certain ways we feel about it. But then we see that need for, low income housing or that middle gap too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I guess there's kind of two answers to that. So in what I oversee is specifically affordable housing. And do I wish that there was more subsidized units that were coming in that had rent restrictions on them? Yes. Do I have enough money to do that, to incentivize that type of growth and to incentivize that type of building? No. unfortunately. So a lot of what you're seeing is just driven by the market and driven by developers who are building market rate apartments saying Colorado Springs is a good market for me to build in, and I can get the ROI that I'm looking for. So if the zoning on the land is appropriate and you can build a multifamily property there, and a developer purchases it, who's going to build luxury apartments, they're going to build luxury apartments. From the city side, we don't say this lot is for affordable, this lot is for market, this lot is for whatever. If it's allowed by zoning, they can build it. It's called a use by right. So yeah, I would love to see those scales tipped a little bit. But honestly, the percentages that we're seeing of affordable coming in is huge. Especially since we haven't seen that in recent years.
Yeah, thank you. I think Brandon talked about, if we have those higher cost housing as well, those folks move into that housing, opens up where they are.
Yeah.
And everyone can get towards ownership.
Yes, exactly. I think one of the things, I'm sorry, I missed this on one of our previous slides where we were talking about like the types of housing. One of the strategies that we are really trying to look at as well is like our city is really zoned for single family housing. We have a ton of single family housing. I think everybody has seen, lots and lots of single family home neighborhoods that don't allow for the building of accessory dwelling units on them, which an accessory dwelling unit is like a mother-in-law suite in your backyard. So if you wanted to have, a college kid around UCCS or around Colorado College, live in your backyard and rent, a small 700 square foot ADU for that, you have to be properly zoned. And in a lot of communities, they say, okay, all single family homes, if you have the space to be able to put this, you can put this. But in our community, we haven't passed that law. There's actually quite a bit of pushback on that. And so those smaller units and like one-offs in people's backyards are really a great form of affordable housing and a really great way to densify our city, to create more housing options for a lot of folks that need it.
We have a question. One.
The money that pays these subsidies, is that part of the city budget?
It's not. So it's not. I think what you're asking, is it part of the city's general fund? Like, is it coming from taxpayers, like City of Colorado Springs taxpayer dollars? Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
No, so it's not. So the City of Colorado Springs receives money from the federal government. So, I mean, we all, I guess, in a sense, are paying into that. The Housing and Urban Development Department distributes money to cities across the country based on population. And so we're receiving money just because of how big we are. And then we can then turn around and give that to developers, or we give that to like homelessness providers like Salvation Army or Springs Rescue Mission for their operations.
Okay. Angela?
According to apartment.com right now, we have about 5,000 vacant apartments. We have about 12,000 that are being built right now and another 8,000 that are waiting to get through the system to start breaking ground. Has there ever been a discussion about getting those 5,000 vacant apartment, not so much the mom and pop kind of places, but the larger apartment complexes who have those vacancies, and figuring out, how can we subsidize any one of these places to lower the rent so that we can get some help? I've heard before city council, affordable is because you can afford it, and attainable is because you can attain it. And that's what the developers in this town think of affordable and attainable housing. But we've got 5,000 vacant apartments. Why can't we work something out?
Mm-hmm. Do you know what that is as a vacancy rate? Like across our entire portfolio? I actually don't know what that vacancy rate looks like.
Yeah, it's small.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what we are, from the city perspective, what we're trying to do, and I don't know, I'm sorry, I'm looking at our presentation to even see. So we talk about how much money we receive, and when I go over how much money the city gets, you'll understand very quickly why we can't do all the things. But when it comes to trying to subsidize, what we're trying to do is with those older apartment complexes, we're trying to identify property owners who are interested in providing affordable housing. And so what we can do is come in with some of our funds to renovate these older properties and then put an affordability restriction on them for 20 years, let's say. And so then we would have an affordable housing complex then for the next 20 years. So that's what we're trying to do to identify that. But there's not a ton that we can do about those vacant units with our funds.
And I think the hesitation when you talk about ADUs and getting those into neighborhoods, it's the infrastructure. It's where are we going to park? It's the water. It's the electricity. It's utilities. It's, that's, I think, the hesitation because of what we've heard before city council is how do we bring them in more houses and densify our neighborhoods? And will we have the infrastructure to support it?
Mm-hmm. And right now in our cost environment, I mean, it's honestly about $350,000 to build one of those ADUs in the backyard, which is very difficult for most households to swing to make that work. But yeah, it's all the things. We're struggling in all of the arenas to try and figure out how to solve this problem. And also know that this is not just like something that the city is working on. We're working with a ton of our community partners on this. So this is a community collaboration. But even though it's a community collaboration, like, why are we interested in it? Sorry, you can go to the next slide.
No, we have another question, but.
Okay, sorry.
Go ahead.
I don't know that I have a question, but sort of a statement. I think it's easy to just assume landlords can give more. There's been quite a bit of change in their expenses too. And there's been quite a bit of change in law in terms of what they have to provide. So they're also feeling a pinch, and to ask them to step up to the plate, especially if they're these small mom and pop landlords, it's a problem for them. So I think it's easy to say, well, there's 5,000 apartments, we can make this happen. I think there's a lot that's out there. So I didn't really have a question, just really a statement.
Okay.
No, that's great. That's a really great point too, is that there's another side to this. It's not just, we want to have accepting landlords, but we are also asking a lot of them as well. We do have some great landlords in our community though, I will say that. Okay, so why is the government really even interested in housing? We are interested in housing because high housing costs hurts our job creation and our job retention. Housing is an economic development strategy. In order for our community can continue to be economically prosperous, we do need to provide housing that is available at all income levels. It also costs a lot for communities to support homelessness, and high housing cost is a direct correlation to homelessness.
Sorry. Gotcha.
It costs about $35,000 a year for a community to support one person who's experiencing homelessness, which is a lot. If that is over year, those funds being able to go towards more, to be able to actually build housing, to provide housing for people and to provide support for people would be a much better use of those expenses. And then Medicaid costs. I mean, this is a federal government investment, and this is why the federal government is interested in this, is for their cost of Medicaid. So we talked about not being cost burdened, but really when it comes down to it, if you are not cost burdened and not paying more than 30% of your income on housing, you're able to spend 5 times more on healthcare, twice as much on retirement, and 1/3 more on healthy food, which, I mean, these are all quality of life factors. Okay, you can go to that.
Assisted living.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
What is Medicaid assisted living?
That's like a nursing home that is paid for from Medicaid. And so a lot of I don't know what the percentage is, but some of our homeless people who are experiencing homelessness end up in Medicaid assisted living facilities. And so Medicaid is covering the cost of their full stay, like their rent in those places. Okay, so we're going to talk about understanding our local toolbox. And so this is really like what can our local governments do? So what can the city do and what can the county do? And just to give you an idea of how we're structured, so the county and the city are not the same entity. We work in different offices. So the mayor and city council oversee all of the city administrative activities, and then the housing and community vitality department, so that's where I work, is just a department within the city. The Colorado Springs Housing Authority, who issues those vouchers that we talked about having 2-year wait lists, they are their own entity. They are not attached to the city of Colorado Springs or El Paso County. And then within El Paso County, we have the county administration and their county commissioners, which are very similar to what a city council role has. And then the 2 departments that work on housing within El Paso County are economic development, which is where Randy works. And then they have their own housing authority, which issues they support multifamily development projects. And then Randy is that yellow bubble in there. So what we can offer from the city and county level is we can offer grants and loans, and we have bonds that we can issue to help develop new multifamily affordable housing. You can go to the next slide. Okay, so let's talk about how much money this actually is. So for the city of Colorado Springs, we receive annually $5 million from HUD for either affordable housing development or supporting services in our community. So like I said, like Springs Rescue Mission, we support them, and Salvation Army. We support many nonprofits in our community, so like Tessa and their operations through these funds. So it's not all for housing. We also receive private activity bonds, and this is from the state, and it's actually allocated to the IRS. But if it's a bond, essentially a bond that's issued by us, just allows developers to have a lower interest rate on some of their financing. We have incentives that we're able to offer, which is tap and infrastructure fees and development review rebates, as well as sales tax refunds. And then and then El Paso County, on the other hand, has about $1 million a year and 300,000 of that for housing. They also receive private activity bonds at $13 million, and then they have a housing trust fund that has about $10 million in it. It's like a revolving loan fund that is loaned out to developers, and as they pay it back, then they loan it back out into the community again. So the other organizations that we partner with, while I said this is a community-wide effort, we work with a lot of our nonprofits in our community. A lot of our nonprofits do provide housing, and they provide housing through low-income housing tax credits, which is a program that's offered through the state. It's a tax credit for investors, traditional lenders, and then our grants through the city.
I have a question. You forgot the third one here, which is the Colorado Springs Housing Authority. Is their budget 4 times the size of these 2 columns, 8 times the size of these 2 columns that you just showed us on the slide? I'm just kind of curious about their budget.
Yeah, so
And it's okay, you can say, I don't really know, but if you said it was $50 million, that would be really interesting to know, even though it's not the responsibilities of the 2 of you.
Yeah, so it's not that. So the Housing Authority operates kind of differently. So they have a portfolio of housing that at one point was developed by the federal government, and they basically are maintaining that housing. What they bring to the table now, towards this discussion for making new housing, is the voucher availability. So they allow households to basically have housing choice throughout our community. And then they also are a housing developer. So they develop projects with low-income housing tax credits. I don't know if any of you have driven on, I think it's Fountain. Recently, was a new project. It's blue, and it's on the left as you're going east, like right out of downtown. That's a housing authority project, and so they develop just like any other developers, but they don't get funding like we do.
Katie, you actually have your partner in crime back.
Oh,
So,
hello, Randy.
Randy, should we go back any slides, or Katie, did you skip over anything that you want Randy to cover?
No, I think we're pretty good.
Okay,
on this.
so we'll just keep moving forward.
Yep, perfect timing, Randy.
You had one
Virginia.
question that was, how do we define poverty? That we have
Yeah.
in there?
So
Do you use the poverty line, Randy?
No, no,
we were on this slide talking about poverty.
yeah, no,
We didn't know
So
how we define it.
Yeah, so if a family of four, if you make less than 19,500, are you considered poverty? Is there any numbers like that?
no, not for anything that we work on in our office.
So I just Googled it really quickly. So the federal poverty lines for a family of four, the annual income would be $37,500.
So down here at this district warehouse.
Somebody have a quick calculator can run
Admin.
$40 or 40 hours a week at what's minimum wage right now, 13 something.
So that'd be probably be around like $19 an hour.
Okay.
So
28
poverty
hours.
level. Okay.
I'm actually surprised that number's not higher. I mean, like the poverty would be considered by 50,000. Especially when you look at a family of four and what it costs to lead a family of four.
Mhm.
Yes. We fixed
Yeah.
it. We
I feel like
fixed
that's
it.
not wrong.
All right. So
That's a major.
Katie was talking about the numbers. This is what we have in the El Paso County toolbox. The things that we can use in our office to help with affordable housing. So we do a down payment assistance program, and I've got flyers for all of my programs up here. If you're interested in any more information, we do have the down payment assistance though. We call ours, it's like the missing middle. That's the new keyword these days, right? We go up to 140% AMI for our down payment assistance program. Then, and ours is fully forgivable, by the way. There's also homeowner rehabilitation. We use those CDBG funds that Katie was talking about to do some rehab projects with Brothers Redevelopment. For rental housing, we do development financing. So she was talking about that housing trust fund. Our housing trust fund is really unique in that it was funded by bond proceeds way back in the day. And the county decided that they wanted to start loaning that out to help develop more instead of just giving it out. Because when you give it out, it's just gone. So we need to loan it out. We need to make a little bit of interest off it, usually between 1% and 3%, which for development is amazing, by the way. But we make a little money off of it and keep it revolving. So we can help more and more and more, and it's continuously going. And so that's our rental housing help. And then the housing services, our CDBG funds partner with different organizations throughout the community. So nonprofits, we have nonprofits for different things. Yay, it worked. Katie?
I have a question.
Oh, yeah.
So you mentioned, for the down payment assistance, because I knew someone that had a down payment assistance and they had to pay it back.
Yep.
So what is the
Probably
difference? Say it?
It's probably CHAPA, Colorado
Oh.
Housing and Finance Authority.
Oh, so what is the difference between, I thought you said there was one that they didn't have to pay back?
Ours, you don't have to. It's fully forgivable, half of it at 5 years and the other half if you live there for 30.
How do you guys get that information out as realtors? Because I specifically asked that question when I bought my house, and they're like, there's nothing out there.
Yeah.
Figure it out.
Well, I used to teach a class on that kind of stuff, but people got to shop around with the lenders. The lenders are the ones that have access to all the different programs.
Well, I even talked to my lender.
Well, your lender might not have had access to all those programs. And then, you know, why would they tell you about something they don't have access to? Just saying.
Well, I'm pissed now.
Or maybe you didn't qualify for it. I don't know. At the time, maybe whatever was out there, you didn't qualify for. That could be
It
too.
was June.
No. Sorry.
No, I'm mad all over.
There was a number of 29 million for developers.
Private activity bonds for heating?
That we they pay it back with interest.
No. I was talking about the housing trust fund here, it's revolving.
How does the 29 million work?
So those are private activity bonds, sorry I touched that. So the way that works is investors put money into projects and in return they get the income off of it tax-free. So that's a private activity fund. So the county gets their share, we get about 13 million based on.
Why are they helping developers out that much? I don't get it.
They get the investment to build with. Like the city right now is looking to put 40 million into Royal Pine up on the north end of town. That's a big, I mean, that's a huge area.
Okay.
It takes a lot of money. We'll talk about that in a second, how that all works. Anybody else?
So I'm still curious where the Section 8 budget is. For, like, that's not in either of your columns.
No.
And that's not even in the city housing authority's column either.
That's in the, it is in the housing authority, but the Section 8 is just the vouchers.
Yep, got it.
So Section 8 is vouchers now.
I understand what Section 8 is vouchers. I was wondering where it was, and it's not in either of your two columns. It's in the third bucket that you guys are.
Yes, it's in the housing authority's bucket, yeah.
Did you want to talk about yours, Katie?
Yeah, I just didn't know if you had any more questions.
Nope.
Okay, so what can the city do to work on this affordable housing problem? What we use our funding for that we just talked about is in, it's actually 6 different types of buckets. 3 of them are for funding, 3 of them are strategies. So for homeownership, we also do down payment assistance through different nonprofit organizations. We don't run our own down payment assistance program. We work with a Habitat for Humanity and Community Land Trusts, which is an organization that will buy a home, a typical home on land. And what they'll do is they will keep ownership of the land, but then they will just sell the home to a low income homeowner. So instead of buying a house for $480,000, which includes the price of the land, what happens, you would have to qualify for a mortgage that was maybe for $250,000 just for the improvement. So just for the house that was on the land. We loan out our money for development financing for new and rehabbed affordable housing projects. And we can pay for engineering. We can pay for construction. We can pay for land acquisition. Land acquisition is a really big piece of our affordable housing construction. And then we also have rebates. So we just recently created a program where when you build a new apartment complex, there's tap fees that go into the project. They're about $200,000 from utilities, and then as well as like an administrative review process, which ends up being about $300,000. And so what we do is we rebate a percentage of those costs to developers, and then they put that money back into the project to help these pencil out, to help these lower rents actually pay back the debt. Did I hear a question?
I don't understand why they would. I still can't understand why they would be giving money to people who have money to develop property. I mean,
yeah, actually, there's a great slide. Randy has a great slide that's coming up. But so I think the easiest way to understand that is so when these developers are coming in, so if you think about a market rate property, it's a very similar to you and if you're owning a home. So, okay, we'll talk about that in just a second. So after you purchase a home, you're paying your mortgage, right? So you're saying, okay, I make, $80,000 a year and I can afford this much house and I'm paying this back. You have that income to pay that back because you have a job. Now with these rental units, what we're seeing is that if you cap their rent at $1,200, but you have a loan, like this developer has a loan for $15 million, they aren't able to pay that loan back in that 30-year period. And so there's a huge gap there. So they might be able to get a loan for $10 million based on $1,200 rent, but say the project actually costs $20 million to construct. Where are you like filling that extra gap, that $10 million? That's where our funds come in because they're very low interest rate funds or grants. And so slowly you start stacking those funds together. Does that help answer that question? So these developers are coming in and they're not paying for the full cost of these projects.
And a lot of these, the developers aren't taking their full fees either to do affordable housing. We're talking some special developers that.
But they have to do affordable, though nobody can live there and they shouldn't have built it in the first place.
Well, somebody can live there, just not poor people.
Could you speak to the consequences if we didn't have incentives for developers to make sure we have enough housing bottom line? Like, why is it so important for, I think that's the core question at the end of the day. Is like, yeah, like you see the amount of money that can go towards housing. So of course our first thing is, oh, well, you know,
Developers
whose
can afford
pocket,
it.
you know, where can it go? So
Yeah.
what would happen if we didn't incentivize developers?
We had that problem up in the Monument area for quite a while where the people who worked in Monument couldn't afford to live there. And I worked in Monument. I worked for a home builder building the big fancy houses, and I couldn't live anywhere near Monument.
That's the same thing that's happening here.
Yeah.
So,
So that's why we're incentivizing developers to build more affordable housing so that we can get more for the regular people that work here to live here as well.
So what you're saying is the bottom line is if you didn't incentivize them, they would build the luxury apartment.
Probably.
Okay.
They make money off it. Here they're, and that other slide that I had up, a lot of times they're giving up part of their fees or postponing getting their fee because they need to leave that money in the project to keep it affordable. Mhm.
I was just wondering what other places do to raise money for affordable housing. Like I think about, you know, Summit County's got a big problem and they've done some projects, and I'm just curious what else, you know, what other models are out there beyond what we're doing.
I haven't looked into that yet. Have you, Katie?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Like Summit County is such a different animal, right? Because they their incomes are astronomical. Like the discrepancy between their incomes is absolutely crazy. What other communities are doing, especially for homeownership types of things, is they're allowing a lot denser housing, which is one of the things that that I've seen is a lot more dense housing through land use policies. We just redid our land use code to allow for this, so hopefully that will solve some of our issues. We are really pulling a lot of the levers that we can pull. As most of you probably know, we are a very conservative community. What a lot of communities are doing is taxing. They're basically saying any new development that's coming in, those developments are paying a tax, and that tax is going into a bucket that then will build affordable housing. And we don't do that here. So that is a pretty huge bucket of money that we are not, gathering. Like Denver does that. And it's to the tunes of like hundreds of millions of dollars that they're able to help with the building of these projects. And I think, so what somebody asked, like, what's the underlying question here? Like, if we don't build affordable housing, what will happen? Is that right? Like, it's a quality of life and an economic development issue. Housing stability, just being able to have people stay in their homes is really just like it's a health outcome. Housing is linked to health. Housing is linked to economic development. It really is just kind of the backbone of communities. A lot of people are starting to refer to housing as infrastructure. And so we'll see if our community ends up pivoting in that way.
On the question of advocacy on taxes, I know that in a lot of areas which are about tourism, there's a new tax that's available for tourist areas. And Colorado Springs, as we learned 4 weeks ago, is a tourist area. Mm-hmm. And the idea is that on hotel room, you could charge an extra little tax on that. And it's actually written in the state law. And do you want us to advocate for that? The idea that tourist taxes then get a bucket of money for having affordable housing for firefighters, teachers, hospitality workers, police officers, because there is a tax that exists right now for tourist areas. And can we advocate for that with the city?
Yeah, whoever that is, can you come and can we work with me, please?
2% plus. Yeah, it's already high. It's the lodging, auto
lodging
rental.
Our LAR is super low. Our LAR is low. I mean, can you imagine getting like $50 out of every Broadmoor hotel room a night? That would be wonderful, right?
Yeah, they get actually more than that.
Okay, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Like that's what I'm saying. Is like, is that what you want us to be advocating for? Is for more taxes in a conservative community?
So one of the things about LART, right now, our LART bucket does not go towards housing. And so the LART fund is, the LART tax is being applied to is being applied to short-term rentals. But the short-term rentals that are taking up a housing unit that is basically like making it so that a resident can't live there, it's more for tourism. Like we're not able to capture any of those funds to then build more housing. So whoever is saying that, if you want to advocate for lodging and rental tax to be able to be used for affordable housing, that is definitely something that is great, at least.
Doing the resort areas. They're using it for affordable housing for their teachers. That's what I'm wondering. Is that what we should be doing?
Yes, there's a lot of people. Yes, there are communities that are doing that, and we currently are not doing that.
Okay. Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
Whoever that is, maybe we'll probably get in contact with you.
I have a question. Are short-term rentals, like, are they greatly affecting our housing market here, or is it just like a small piece?
That's a really good question. We have thousands of them. We're hoping to get a grant to be able to do a housing study, like a gap analysis, to really understand like what Randy is talking about, like high income people living in like what technically would be a low income unit, and really understanding what the gap is. And within that study, we're probably going to also analyze what the impact of short-term rentals are. I mean, we have thousands and thousands of them across the city, so it is making a huge difference. I can't nail down a percentage for you. Like our short-term rental stock is reducing residents' abilities to buy homes by X%. We don't have that data.
Is there anything else you wanted to talk about on this slide, Katie?
I think one of the big things I want to talk about is our land use policies. Like what the city can do to help with affordable housing is land use policies. A lot of development goes back to land use policies, and a lot of how cities work goes back to land use policies. And just how we can build. We did just go through an extensive rewrite of our zoning code. And so, like I said, hopefully some of these strategies will enable more building of smaller units that are really a great entry point and price point for first-time homeowners. The other ways that we help with affordable housing is that we work with nonprofits to build capacity to make sure that they're able to build these projects. So supporting their staff, like paying for staff salaries to be able to do this work, and then direct assistance to residents through some of our short-term programs that we issue through nonprofits. Okay.
Katie and Randy, just do a quick time check. So I think we want to leave about 15-20 minutes for the exercise. Is that right? Oh,
yep.
Right.
This is our last slide.
Okay, so I'll just go back to this. Guys, carry on.
This is actually taken from one of the programs or developments, I should say, that Katie and I both have funding in on. And you can see 50 units of apartments, and it costs just over 20 million to do that. And you can see all the different pieces that go into that. So we were talking about the low-income housing tax credits, grants, loans, the developer fee that is not waived. What's the word for that, Katie? It's deferred. Thank you. Deferred developer fee. Then we have the city funding, El Paso County Housing Authority funding. That's in development fund, and then the city rebates. So all of it adds up. They call that the funding stack. So we're just one little piece here in our community, one little piece of that big project that is going up. That's how it all comes together. So group exercise, were we going to split up now, or should we go over the rules?
Why don't we go over the rules real quick? Because I do need to jump off for just a few minutes, and then I can come back. Um, so what we're going to do here is it's build your own affordable housing strategy. So we're going to give you different tools that we've talked about that you can choose from. And what we're going to use is the city's data. So we have a population of about 484,000 people in our community, and you get $5 million to create affordable housing strategies. How are you and your group going to advance affordable housing in the community? What is the rationale behind your strategy? And so, and then these are the questions that we will go over or that you can talk about with your group.
So just like them, immediately we went for the no cost stuff. We're going to pass these ways to we're going to try to get our community involved for the first part of saying, we're not putting new stuff in our community right now. We're going to revitalize as much stuff as permanently there. Because like, as they said with Chapel Hills Mall, South Academy's got lots of empty property. So we put $2 million into rehabbing commercial buildings into residential units right away. And we're going to put as many residential units in those commercial properties as possible and keep them in the affordable areas, because so much of that empty space is in the lower economy areas a lot of times. And so those people need housing to continue. And then we decided that we were going to put $200,000 into rehabilitation for houses for homeowners, so people can buy houses that need rehabilitation because they're already going to be cheaper, but they don't have that money to help rehabilitate them. So that's where we come in. We also decided to put $1 million into down payment assistance, because the more people we get into a house, the more people have pride in their house. They it's a step towards home ownership that everybody should have. And we kind of felt like that was worthwhile. And the other thing was moving the people out of homelessness and into apartments. We put a whole $1 million into that. And the way we look at it is that's like 2+ people in each house, hopefully maybe more, so that we could really do a chunk to the homeless population, get them into something. And then we put the rest of our money divided into rental assistance for evictions and for foreclosure prevention, because we're saying if you already have it, let's keep you in it, because we don't need empty buildings around. So let's do what we can to keep you in it when you're struggling, rather than just kicking you out and restarting the homeless process all over again.
Great conversation. So you guys really were thinking very thoroughly through this. I'm going to move to this side of the room for a second. And actually, by a show of hands, who all has like an itemized breakdown like these first two groups did? Did all the groups do this? Do we all have our itemized breakdown? Oh, no, we don't have it over here. Okay, I'm gonna come back over here. I'm gonna hold on for you guys for just a second. Did you answer any of these questions?
No.
We're all now, so. Okay, so if you didn't answer these questions, you didn't do an itemized breakdown. What's our takeaway from tonight from this exercise?
We actually looked at all of the different areas and kind of discussed what what that means, and what that means for our community, and how how we could actually make this work. So we spent a lot more time just trying to figure out is this really important? Is it not? We talked a lot about transportation. And I know that that's not a housing thing, but it really is. And how do you, we were talking about the north end of town and how they're building, high-end apartments or just affordable housing apartments. And so how do you get those people to the other areas of town so that they can, live and work in those places?
Why can't they work up there?
Yeah, right. Well, exactly. So, and then we also kind of talked about a little bit, communities and why we don't have, dwelling units in them, and so we discussed HOAs and, that some of them are if you have your trash cans on the outside of your fence, then, you get a no note. So, we talked more about hurdles about some of these things than more about the budget and how we would actually do it, because the hurdles are the things that are probably really holding us back from, making a lot of these things happen. But, some of the things that we did discuss is probably our number one thing, of course, everybody else, the no cost things, if you could make them happen. Mm-hmm. And then probably the 100,000 for the 150 households per year, because that's going to really, get a wider, a bigger group of the population to help them out. So, and then we just kept talking about all these other things, okay, this is really good, but how can we afford to do that? And, sure. And how can we get people? So we did okay.
I know you did. I heard you guys talking, so you did good. So now coming to this side of the room, who answered question number 1? Not ready. Okay. All right. So I'm gonna go right here. Did you guys answer question number one?
Yeah, I think we answered question number one.
What was your answer?
Well, our answer was that the population and the group is about helping residents, and it was really about helping families and having the biggest bang for the buck for families. That was our subgroup that we had.
I love it. I love it. Now, in the group.
So it was not developers, it was families. That would be really good.
Okay. Well, fun times next week. We have a developer coming in. Remember our ground? Remember our ground rules next week? Yeah, ground rules will be posted next week. All right, coming to the groups that haven't spoken yet. Who answered number two? Right.
We did, what we looked at is the financial sustainability of the programs was really to make sure that the people who are moving into rentals, moving into homes, getting this assistance, they have to have some skin in the game. So they also have to have a financial responsibility to be part of these programs and not for it to be a handout or a freebie. I mean, I don't think anybody wants that.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't want that either. So that's the way we looked at it. And then do you want us to answer the last question?
No. Yeah, good job. Hey, ready though. I got two more groups to talk here. Who's coming with me on the third question? Who's coming with me? Who's coming with me? How are you gonna get some buy-in? How are you gonna get people to say yes to your plan?
Oh, well, I think we decided, actually, we did a little bit looking backwards rather than strictly forwards. And we also, didn't spend any time on the numbers because we were like big concept people. So we looked back to the days of the Depression, and at that time, if you didn't work, you didn't eat. And so when we, talked about so many, unemployed in our society, we developed a program, or we developed a program somewhat like Habitat for Humanity, where you have sweat equity in building your home or your apartment or your pod or whatever. And since you've done it, you'd also then have the pride of ownership and maintaining it. And that was one of the concepts that we thought would work. And then we also looked at the Asian model of sleeping pod, where you have a place where you sleep and then you go out and work during the day. And a little bit like the Public Works Administration during the 30s. We don't need to build bridges now, but we need to fix an awful lot of roads. We need to pick up trash that other people are throwing around. There are plenty of jobs that can be done by people that would be willing to work. And we also looked at allowing for ADU units or small units on properties that want to do that, to do that, and are not allowed to do it now by zoning.
Got it.
So those are some of the major things we looked at.
That's great. So if you go to my office at 3 o'clock on a daily basis, that also does as a sleep pod, but gotta get afternoon nap in, right? So I like it, and I like that you started thinking, well, we gotta know our past to know our future. It's so funny because in orientation we talked about the past of Colorado Springs, and then you built how you built things, and we kind of built our ground rules together. So I mean, I think we're kind of using that model with our neighboring university too, right? So all right. You get the last word.
Well.
Okay, good. You guys are learning so well. So this group, you get the last word.
I guess on number one, we struggle with the problem of prioritizing the construction side of the equation, i.e. developers, versus the direct impact on people living in homes. But in the end, we put most of our money into rehabbing commercial buildings into residential units, which seems like a pretty efficient, reasonable thing to do. It's maybe less expensive than building from scratch. And then even though we really had no idea what this means, the nonprofit assistance for service providers seemed like you touch a lot of homeowners.
So like
for a little
Ratio
money.
Housing, Partners in Housing, Homework Pikes Peak.
Okay.
There's lots of those nonprofits that are, out there doing the work.
Yeah.
You guys all have access to this slideshow. And so they've been kind enough to provide a lot of great links. Do you want to talk about any of the links?
So the ones that I wanted to make sure were up there are for like city council meetings and the county commissioner meetings. And, when all of these things come up, when we're trying to get these passed to get the money out there, we need the support. So if you could show up, put your 2 cents in, let us know if we're missing something out of our toolbox, if there's anything else we can add to it. Yep.
I have a question about the nonprofit assistance and the services, that are there. I work at Myron Stratton, I think. For those who don't know what Myron Stratton is, part of the city where seniors live in cottages and in different buildings. It also has partners in housing, and it also has pets out there. And from my understanding, there is a wait list for some of these, not the cottages, but partners in housing is,
There's a
big-
wait list at the cottages too.
right.
It's
There's a
like 3
big
years.
wait list for Cheshire as well. And then my question to that is, since I know how big homelessness and certain issues that are related to Tessa are, is how much other complexes or properties are there like Myron Stratton? And will there be more? Because it's probably, just as important as building affordable housing and, housing for low income, the low income neighbors, to find out if there's something that can be, extended as far as partners in housing and Tessa, especially Tessa with everything that's going on.
Great answer that.
Yeah.
Thank you for that question. It's a really good question, very well-rounded. I don't want anybody to run out of here just yet. We're gonna answer this question quickly. I'll have just like a couple quick housekeeping things before we get out of here. I do want to be respectful of your time though. It is 8 o'clock. So give me just like 2 more minutes. So go ahead, Randy.
There's one other place I know of, it's not Ivy Wild, it's that other school that they've built. What's that?
It's Helen Hunt.
Alan Hunt, thank
Oh.
you. Where all the nonprofits came together. And it's pretty much the same, the big difference, of course, Myron Stratton's got the money, the huge pot of money, the foundation there. But yes, awesome idea.
Great, thank you.